Hi, I'm Mike Kadas. I'm the mayor of City of Missoula. This is the start of a series of shows that we're doing with MCAT. In addition to MCAT's coverage of the regular Monday night city council meetings, MCAT's going to be covering planning board meetings, community forum meetings, and an occasional show from a city department. These shows will focus on the history of our city, city projects, city government, and other issues that pertain to the larger valley and community of western Montana. Public access is funded through a franchise fee on cable television. That tax or fee is then used to fund MCAT, which contracts with the City of Missoula to do the programming. To understand the City of Missoula and the Missoula area, I think it helps to look at a picture of western Montana. And you see Missoula due south of Flathead Lake, and probably the main characteristic about Missoula is that it's on really the only east-west travel corridor for hundreds of miles in either direction. You have to go all the way north to Marias Pass to get really any kind of a pass, and even Marias in many years ago was a very difficult pass to get across. And to the south, you really have to go all the way to southern Idaho to be able to travel east to west or west to east. So that corridor has really made Missoula a meeting place for all kinds of cultures. The Blackfoot River was known by the Indians as the road to the buffalo. It was a key travel corridor for particularly the Nez Perce and the Salish to get to the buffalo on the plains of eastern Montana. The name Missoula comes from that connection with the buffalo. There are many stories about how Missoula got its name. The best one that I've been able to find, and what seems to be closest to the truth, I found in the book Following Old Trails. It's a book of a compilation of stories and articles written by Arthur Stone, who was the editor of the Missoulian in the early 1900s, and then later became the dean of the journalism school at the U of M. The word Missoula comes from the Salish phrase, Nem Isul Ketu, and that is roughly translated to frightening place by the water or place of surprise by the water. And the reason for that name is because it was a key place of ambush for the Blackfeet to capture and harass both Nez Perce and Salish as they made their journey to the east annually in search of buffalo. And so there were many battles, and lots of people died in that narrow canyon. The French took that phrase and turned it into Porte d'Enfer, or the Gate of Hell. And then the English took that and turned it into Hellgate. And that's really where the name of the canyon, Hellgate Canyon, comes from. And really the first community in this area was called Hellgate. Hellgate was actually about 4 miles west of what we call Missoula now, around Grant Creek. And it started out around 1860. And you can see here the first Warden's Market. This is Frank Warden at his Hellgate post. Hellgate had a fairly exciting reputation. In the early 1860s, it averaged a population of about 14 people. In one 2-year stretch, amid a couple of visits by the vigilantes, there were 11 deaths with the population of 14. All of those deaths were unnatural. It was a pretty rough place, and a lot of outlaws tended to hang out in this neck of the woods. Around in the middle 1860s, 1864, 1865, the the folks who had come, Warden and some others, decided that what we needed was a sawmill. And to do that, they needed a fresh source of power, which would be water power. And so they created Missoula Mills, which was a mill that was established right about where the Higgins Street Bridge is these days. That really is what the community began to grow around that mill at that time, and the small community of Hellgate withered, and eventually most folks moved to what became Missoula. One of the first buildings in downtown Missoula was the Missoula Mercantile. It still stands today and is the Bon. It's been a stalwart centerpiece of the downtown area for nearly 100 years. Another key part of early Missoula was the Northern Pacific Railway. It was established in 1889, and Missoula was a central hub and really quite a railroad town. And you can see lots of remnants of that on the north side and in the downtown area. At the early part of the century, Missoula was mostly north of the river, and getting across the river was a problem. There were a couple of attempts at bridges, most of which were washed out. A pretty good bridge was in place by 1809, but then the 1809 flood took it out as well. But I think after that flood, the town began to move more across to the south side of the banks. And of course, the thing that really set up the growth on the south side of the banks was the University of Montana. The story of the University of Montana is an interesting one. Montana became a state in 1899, and the Missoula delegation first attempted to bring the University of Montana, or Montana State University as it was known, to Missoula in the 1891 legislative session. They failed, and part of the reason they failed was because none of the legislators from Helena supported the proposal. The main competition at that time was Great Falls, who they wanted to have the sole state university in Great Falls. In 1892, there was a referendum to locate the state capital. And there were 6 or 7 communities that were vying for it, and 2 frontrunners emerged, Helena and Anaconda, though neither of them received enough votes to actually become the state capital. But it was narrowed down to Helena and Anaconda in the 1892 referendum. In the 1893 legislature, Missoula again tried to become the home of the university. And they finally were successful, and they did it by striking a deal with the Helena delegation. And it was essentially a trade. If Helena would support Missoula as the home of the university, the Missoula delegation would support Helena as the home of the state capital. There was another referendum then in 1894. The Missoula delegation actively campaigned for Helena. And while Missoula didn't go even a majority for Helena, there was a significantly more support from Missoula than in the 1892 referendum, and Helena did win. That was also a fairly notorious election. This was part of the War of the Copper Kings, and lots of alcohol and money flowed freely in order to buy votes for Helena and Anaconda. Missoula has a real wealth of old historic buildings, and one of the real treasures of Missoula is the downtown with its wide sidewalks and high density of businesses. But over time, we've also lost some buildings. This side is a view looking west on Front Street at the junction of Front and Higgins. And the building on the right is the old Florence Hotel, which burned down. The building on the left is the Hammond Building, which also burned down. And the picture is taken from the first Interstate building, which was torn down about 1960. So we've also lost a number of really classic buildings. One of the things that we struggle with is trying to keep and enhance those old buildings, particularly in the downtown area. I think we all recognize the value of the architecture of that time and the character that those types of buildings add to our community. Another great building of Missoula is the Montana Building. This is it, the Montana Building in 1911, during a visit where Theodore Roosevelt came to Missoula. He's at about street level, but you can see a really beautiful building. 6 stories. It was a bank building. It's still a part of Missoula, though much of the decoration and facades have been covered up over the years. Another great building for Missoula is the Wilma Building. The Wilma's got a great history, lots of mystery about it, but it's been a real icon and standard for our community for years and years, and it's nice to see it getting fixed up again. A newer addition is the Millennium Building, built just on the other side of Higgins, just upstream from the Wilma Building. This is, I think, a change for Missoula, and we see kind of the impacts of growth, and what I think is a positive impact of, as a community, we're trying to grow up rather than out, and I hope that the Millennium Building is an example of that. One of the things about the Millennium Building that we haven't done very much of in the past is that it will have some housing in it, so the top 2 floors will be residences. The rest of the floors will be commercial office space. Another old building from Missoula recently came down. This is the St. Patrick's Hospital last fall, and it was imploded. Took all of about 15 seconds, and a place where I think a lot of people have fond memories. I think many Missoulians were actually born in the St. Patrick's Hospital. What we see today is a new modern medical complex that's being built there. It should be done in another, I think, a year and a half is the construction time frame. But over the years, Missoula has become an important medical center for all of western Montana, and St. Pat's has recognized the need to update their facilities and are investing in the neighborhood of $50 or $60 million to do that. Missoula's changed quite a bit over the years, and one of the issues that we deal with the most today is that change, and how do we handle it? I think it's helpful to look back over time and look at what we used to be. This picture was taken in 1937. That's the fairgrounds and Malfunction Junction. It's just a crossing of dirt tracks at that time, a little more than 60 years ago. Since then, this has really become the geographic center of town, and we've grown several miles both to the south and to the west. I think in the future, we can probably expect to see that type of growth continuing. And so how we plan for that growth is pretty critical in terms of what our community will look like over the next 20 or 30 or 50 years. This is a graph that shows Missoula's growth and also the growth of other cities in Montana. Some interesting things, you can see a lot of Montana history in this graph. Butte was a great mining town, peaked at over 40,000 people in the early 1920s, and then slid and then had a renaissance with the open pit mine, but then has really not grown much at all. Great Falls benefited from the agricultural of eastern Montana, and was also a major smelting area for the Anaconda mines, particularly the Butte mine. and the home of a large number of missiles. It has peaked out as well about in the 1970s, and its growth has been flat. And in fact, just this last year, Missoula passed Great Falls in population to become the second largest city in Montana. Billings, of course, has had rapid growth from the 60s on and has really outpaced all other Montana cities by quite a bit. The other one city that's changing rapidly is Bozeman. Helena has grown some over the years, but it's more of a steady type of growth. Bozeman has boomed in the same way that Missoula has over the last 10 or 15 years. One of the things that Missoula did a couple of years ago, in the face of all the growth that we've been experiencing, was in 1995 we passed an open space bond. That was for $5 million, and the first purchase was Mount Jumbo. That took $2 million of the $5 million. Since then, we've also purchased land on the North Hills, the Randolph Ranch. We've purchased the face of Mount Sentinel, about 100 acres out at Fort Missoula for playing fields, and we used open space money to leverage other transportation funds to purchase the Bitterroot Spur trail along the Bitterroot Spur Railroad that heads up the Bitterroot. Other changes that Missoula has seen is that we recently finished construction on a new transit center. One of the things that we'd been missing as far as our transit system was an actual center. It had been kind of kicked from one corner to the next over the last 15 years. And I think we finally decided that we really needed to create a home if we were serious about transit and try to make this system work. And so we built what I think is a very nice center, comfortable and durable, that will help people get in and out of the elements. And also, it creates a place for people who are interested in transit and want to use the bus or to get from A to B. I think we've made a lot of progress in this area. You see lots of you see some new park and rides forming, and we also have a pretty good partnership with the University of Montana, trying to deal with some of the parking problems that are created at U of M because of the large number of students and staff who use that facility. Another project that got finished not too long ago is the California Street Footbridge. The California Street Footbridge replaces an old bridge. It was an automobile bridge many years ago, was actually condemned and taken apart around 1980. It was a very handy way for pedestrians and bicyclists to get across. It's particularly nice now because it's right next to Eagle Watch Estates, which is a place for developmentally disabled people, and it's wheelchair accessible. It's a good way for people who don't have a lot of mobility to get out and really be right in the thick of a great, beautiful riparian area. Another great project that the community has done, really without much help from local government, is the Glacier Ice Rink. It was really put together by a dedicated group of private individuals who just really wanted to have ice to play hockey and to skate on. And now it's used pretty much all hours of the day. I know that there are practices that are scheduled after 11 o'clock at night, and it starts up pretty early in the morning. It's really become a great asset to our community. And it shows what a little work can do, and stick-to-itiveness and community effort can put together a project like this. We have a great experience with doing things as a community. The Carousel Project, the Missoula Children's Theater, the downtown Caras Park Pavilion are all things that citizens and residents have kind of gotten together on and really made happen themselves. We do it together as a community. They help build us as a community, but they create great places for people to get together and meet and enjoy themselves. Another major project that's happening downtown that I'm afraid a lot of people are probably aware of because of the inconvenience that it creates. But when it gets done, it'll be a real improvement, and that's the Orange Street Bridge. The bridge has is a bottleneck in terms of traffic, but also in terms of for bicyclists and pedestrians. And when we get the new bridge built with 4 lanes for traffic and 2 bike lanes and 2 separated sidewalks, I think it'll be a great place, a great way to get across the river, and also to just go out and see the river from a good vantage point. Missoula is a community that really values the outdoors and values opportunities for our children. So we work hard to try to keep our park system up. This is one of our city pools. We've also got lots of trails and recreational programs and opportunities for kids to do things that get them out and about, and also get them knowing each other and knowing everyone else in the community. We try to create opportunities for kids to work with all age groups and to really get a good sense of what Western Montana is about, which a large part of which I think is just being out in it. I want to shift gears for a little bit here and talk about the city government itself. We have about a general fund budget of $23 million a year. I've got a couple of pie charts here to show what it is we do. There are about 4 major areas that the city of Missoula spends its money on. The first is police protection. About 25% of our budget goes to police. We have over 80 police officers, and the department has over 100 people in it. The fire department is next with about 20% of the budget. We have about 75 full-time firemen. We have about 75 full-time firefighters. One thing about police and fire is that they're both departments that have to be staffed 24 hours a day. And it takes about 5 full-time people to have enough coverage to have one person available for 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. So that's one of the reasons these cost so much. They're critically important to our community. I mean, they involve safety and security, but it's not a cheap kind of service to be able to provide. And the people who do this work also are in positions of risk at times. Whether you're a policeman or a firefighter, you're often put into dangerous circumstances. The other big things that we do are the Public Works Department is about 17% of our budget. Public Works does a number of things, from the engineering division to the streets division to sewer and building codes. Mostly what we see in our day-to-day life is the streets department. They take care of our streets. They pick up the leaves, they do the snow plowing, they sand the streets, put on the de-icer, and occasionally, when we have time in the summer, do street repair. But it's a pretty big department, and it's important. They do work that covers all hours of the day too, and in fact we change our shifts around quite a bit in the winter so that we can have good coverage during the snow season. The other department that I think is worth noting is the Parks Department. And this is about 10% of our budget, but parks and recreation is one of those very important amenities that we all appreciate and expect in a community. And it's one of the reasons that we live here, is because there are parks. There are some really great parks in Missoula, like Kadas Park and Bonner Park and Greeno Park. But there are lots of parks throughout the city that offer a variety of recreational opportunities. And we do our best to keep those up and to create new opportunities in those parks. In general, the types of things that we do as a city are we provide goods or services that wouldn't get provided very well if they were just being done by the private market. They are what are known as public goods. They are the types of things that we do better when we do them collectively. So like police, we could all hire our own security firm and receive a level of security that way, but it's a lot more cost effective when we do it together. Same thing with fire protection, or with creating streets, or with parks, and with open space is the latest example. It's a lot easier for us to collectively buy and use open space than it is if we just allow the private market to do that for us. So that's one of the reasons that you see citizens of Missoula voting over 60% support for something like an open space bond that increased all of our taxes by 2 or 3 mills. But we all get a benefit from that. Those are the kinds of things that a city government does. They are primarily the types of things that we do much more efficiently in an economic sense when we do them all together. It costs us less if we do them all together than if we try to do them individually. Another thing to look at in our budget is how we spend our money, on what types of things do we spend our money. And so this pie chart shows you that about 65% of our expenditures go to wages and benefits. So essentially that tells you that we're an organization, as the city of Missoula, that is really highly dependent on personnel. It's the people who work for the city, the policemen, the firefighters, the streets department, the people who work in our parks. That's what really makes up and provides the services that you get from the city of Missoula. We're absolutely dependent on them, those employees, to do a good job for the rest of the community. This last graph I wanted to show you indicates where our money comes from. As you can see, about half of the city's general fund revenue comes from property taxes. That's a pretty big chunk. The next biggest chunk that is directly identified is 9% from video gaming. And that's something that's happened over the last 12 or 15 years as video gaming has become more popular and as the legislature has allowed more of it. The taxes on video gaming are split between the state and the local government where the video gaming happens, 2 parts to 1. So the state gets 1/3 and the cities or counties get 2/3. But it's become a huge part of our budget, almost 10%, which makes many people uneasy because there are also lots of moral and ethical issues that go along with gambling. And it's not something we're always comfortable with, but in order to fund the services that we provide, this is one of the revenue sources that we have. And we've, over the last years, as the legislature has frozen property taxes, you've seen cities and counties moving towards other sources of revenue. So what you see here is not uncommon. We get a number of licenses and permits, also some intergovernmental transfers. But as you can see, the main part of our revenues come from taxes. The city is made up of, in terms of our government, we have a city council that is, the city is split into 6 roughly equally sized wards. Each ward has 2 representatives or alderpeople. And they are elected for alternating 4-year terms. So we have a 12-person city council, and then the mayor is elected citywide, and then we have a municipal judge that is elected citywide. The city council is primarily responsible for the policy of the city, and the mayor is primarily responsible as the chief administrative officer, maintaining the executive branch, making sure that all those policies get carried out. Not unlike what you see at the state government between the governor and the legislature. We put up this map on the city council wards so that you can see which ward you're in and also identify who your alderperson is. Another map I want to show you has to do with our neighborhood councils. We have 17 neighborhood councils in the city now. They all elect their own leadership teams, and then collectively form the community forum, which you see occasionally, once a month, I believe, on MCAT. The neighborhood councils are something that were created in our new city charter that was passed in 1995. They are another mechanism for citizens to influence city government and what happens within our city. So there are three main ways to affect how things happen. One is through the neighborhood councils. The second is through your own city alderman or alderwoman. And the third is through my office, the mayor's office, or any of the departments that you may have an issue with or you have a suggestion. And we encourage you to give us a call and let us know what you think. If you'd like more information, please do give us a call. We've listed our phone number and email address and our snail mail address. We appreciate comments and suggestions. We try to be responsive when people do ask us for suggestions. Well, that's a pretty brief history and overview of what the city of Missoula is and is trying to do. If you have suggestions, we'd really like to hear from you. I've listed our address and email address and phone number. We appreciate hearing from you. I hope this has been helpful, and I look forward to seeing other shows that you'll see from other departments. I understand the fire department's working on one, and I know we'll see some from Public Works Department on projects that they've got coming up. Hopefully, the other thing we're trying to do through this program is to enhance the visibility of the planning board and the community forum. So if you can't always attend those meetings, you're at least able to watch them on MCAT and participate in that way. Thanks very much.